Okay, we've had a lot of talk about the African American community when it comes down to player hating and all of this. Before we even start on the player hating thing, here's some numbers you need to know. There's only about 2.3 million African Americans in the United States that filed taxes that made over $100,000 a year out of 46 million. Now, out of that 46 million of African Americans, only 41 million actually claim that they're African American or black only, which means that 5 million are saying that they are African American mixed with blah blah blah. Okay, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. We shouldn't have a problem with that as people in general. What I do have a problem with is that 2.3 million out of 46 million African Americans make $100,000 or more. Now, what does that mean? That means that, think about this for a moment. That means that all of these people talking about player hating and everything else aren't making diddly squat or less than 100 grand a year. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, what that means is that we're put in a position of never being empowered. I mean, we talk all this stuff now. You have all this stuff about women's empowerment and everything. But what they don't tell you is, guess who's leading black men in heart disease, in other maladies involving the heart and our bodies? Black females. So what I'm getting at is this. We understand that you can't find a man, or when you do find a man, you have all these requirements. And guess what? Nobody's going to measure up to those requirements. Because demographically, there are 600,000 more of you than there are African American men in population with degrees. That's just the way it is. So what does that mean? Guys like myself, who have a bachelor's and an MBA, are out there trying to get into the job market, or who are in the job market and barely hanging on because of the fact that they do not want guys like us in the market as much as they do women. And the reason being is only obvious. Who's the most important? They use this word called fit. Before it was overqualified, which is an ambiguous term. What does that basically mean? That means that I could really filter you out based on criteria that I don't really have to tell you or disclose. For instance, James, you're not the right fit because in our environment, we're a little bit more colloquial, or we're a little bit more casual. You're a little bit too formal. You show up for an interview in a suit. The rest of the people are showing up in jeans and t-shirts for a job that requires a suit in most environments, but yet they're considered for the job and you're told that you are dressed a little bit too formally for the venue. And that's just one example. But what I'm getting to you, what I'm trying to get to you is this. You haven't made it. So don't trip. You have not made it. With those numbers, there's no way in hell. And here's another thing, ladies, when it comes down to this women's empowerment movement, let me tell you something. Here's the distinction between what you're trying to do now in 2015 and what was done back in the 1970s with Caucasian women. Caucasian women did it, but their men were already empowered. You're trying to do it with a weak man behind you, and it's not going to work. That's just the way it is. Oh yeah, you will have the nice jobs, but you see what's happened now. You have all these women that have made it, and they're looking back at the black men saying, well, what happened to you? And they want to go forward with white men, but you look at the numbers. Less than 10% of the white population actually dates outside their race. And the majority of people that they do date are married are Asian, not black. So it's something to think about. You know, here's the deal. There is no placebo for this. I don't mean placebo. There is no messiah for this. What's going to happen is going to happen. And what will happen, we keep this on, we'll still be marginalized. You know, and I hear a lot of people talk about movies like shows like Scandal. You really think of Scandal, think about what the undertone is. An African American woman going around Washington slinging her vagina around. That's basically what you're dealing with. And we're supposed to be cool with that. Or when we look at Empire. Empire's a great show, don't get me wrong. Great writing. However, look at the genesis of Empire. Lucius Lyon started out as a thug on the street. And he had to kill his way to the top. Is that all we do? Of course not. And so what needs to happen is, and we don't really need the Cosby Show to come back, because that was a little bit too superficial. Because there's only a small percentage of African Americans that were doing it back then, like they were. We don't need a Good Times, because there was, again, a few African Americans that were fitting into that demographic. Look, here is the thing. You can check the stats. African Americans work for themselves more so than they work for another company or an organization. So what we need to do is start assisting each other in order to get these jobs, in order to make this money, in order to reclaim our neighborhoods, clean them up, and start using them just like everybody else has used their communities to leverage for more businesses, more companies. And I don't mean Walmart, and I don't mean these 20-hour a week jobs. I'm talking about real economic growth, where someone can come into that community, where a company can come in that community and cultivate it and get it going. And the crime rate will go down. When people have money in their pockets, there's no need to go out and steal. When they're living better than they would on the street. Because see, you got to remember, even these thugs and these thieves, they don't make $100,000 a year. They're just going from theft to theft to theft to crime to crime to crime. So they're not making it. So that's what needs to happen. I am just sick of hearing it. All of this crap about player hating. Ladies, let this glue crap go, and let the hair, all that weave crap, let that go. Do something with your own hair. I've been to India. I've seen what they do when they get that hair before it gets over here in those nice little packages. Trust me. Here's what I'm getting at is you're exemplifying self-hate in general. You're using somebody else's hair because yours is not good enough. You're telling the world right now that you're not worth a damn just because of that. And it cracks me up when I hear people say, well, why are you buying somebody else's hair? Yours is not good enough? Think about it. Chris Rock wasn't stupid when he made that film. Because he underscored what I've been trying to advocate for God knows how long. You got to start with self-love. Until you start from that point, everything else you do is all nothing but a placebo. Vanity talk. That's all it is. Because the bottom line comes down to, and I'm doing this tape off the cuff, no script, I'm just going off the top of my head because this is all pure adrenaline. I'm 53 years old. The biggest devastation to the African American community in recent times was the 2008 financial crisis. 57% of African Americans lost their personal wealth. Now, think about it. It took generations to get that. So what I'm getting at is, instead of sitting here talking about who's player hating who, we need to come off of this. We need to come off of all this money that we're spending in these different organizations that are not actually giving us what we need. Look at these churches. I mean, it's nice to go and worship the Lord, but you know what? You could do that at home. You could do that on your knees. You could do that with your partners. You could do that anywhere. We have that freedom. You don't have that freedom in other countries where you can go and pray wherever you want. So what I'm getting at is putting somebody in a Rolls Royce and putting them in a nice home in Bel Air or Beverly Hills is not the answer. That's not going to get you any closer to heaven than that guy on the street who can minister to you. So what I'm getting at is we need to come off of watching these shiny metal objects and stick to what we know that works. Think about it for a moment. When half of our ancestors came across the Middle Passage, if a mother got sick and that mother was not going to be able to make it to the United States or to whatever colony they were going to send her to, what did she do? She handed the baby over to somebody who was probably a total stranger from another tribe. They had nothing to do with her. And that mother was allowed to take care of that child while his original birth mother probably passed away on the ship and was thrown out to sea. We have to start thinking about that. So that brother that you got that gun on, that you holding that pistol in his face, that grudge you have, think about it. His ancestors could have been a very individual that saved somebody in your family line to get your black ass right here in the United States, where you can go and pull that gun on that same individual. For what? A few pieces of silver. Think about it. Think about it. We're better than that as a people. The thing is, we have the knowledge, we have the tools, we just don't want to use them. There's more to us than being an athlete or an entertainer. And look, I know you guys guard that like I don't know what, but here's the thing. We also need to have scientists. We need to have real estate brokers. We need to have doctors. We need to have lawyers. We need to have computer sciences. Because there are places in this country, no matter how many IT skills you have and certifications and degrees, they have their own cliques. They don't want you in. Bottom line. Because here's the thing. Laws can regulate what a person does. They cannot regulate how a person feels. That goes for the shootings with these young black men in these different locations. Because no matter how, and here's another thing, people. When I saw that press interview with that guy apologizing, did you notice that whole disposition of that shot? It looked like he was running for governor. And the black people were endorsing him. That's what it looked like. The way it should have been handled was after he had given his apology, one of those individuals should have came up and said, you know what? We accept, and you know something else? We're not going to ruin this guy's career or life because of this mistake. He admitted it was a mistake. We are bigger than that. What does that mean? They could have included him in something in order to rehabilitate the community and help with race relations. That was a teachable moment. We don't want to look at it that way. We want to get pissed off. Because here's the thing. He learned that from somebody else. So somebody else had to go through the effort of teaching him that. And he just went along with it. The teacher is what concerns me. The person who taught him that is what concerns me. Not necessarily him, because it's just like anything. We follow stuff. So that's what I'm getting at. As African Americans, you're at a vantage point now in society. Think about it for a moment. You look at the movies. 70s, you had a lot of black exploitation movies. 80s kind of died off. 90s, it came back. Black movies, black television shows, just like it did in the 70s. Now, it laid back until now. You got Empire and you got all these black shows. Guess what's going to happen again? It's going to go back underwater again. Why? Because of the fact that we still are making movies. We're still making television shows. But guess what? We're not the decision makers. We're not the executives allocating the money that is needed for certain shows because we don't have the numbers. And that's been the problem all along. We're trying to do things that the white folks do, but we don't have the numbers in order to substantiate those endeavors. That's where the problem is. You can't live large if you don't have the clout to back you. I mean, you can go through the motions. You can go move to Atlanta and act like you're living in Beverly Hills. But what good is that doing